Welcome back to the LilWeird Podcast. I'm your host, Jane. In the last episode, we explored the extraordinary apparitions experienced by Teresita Castillo and the profound connection to Saint Therese of Lisieux. We delve into the divine messages and the awe-inspiring encounters that transform a quiet Carmelite monastery into a site of spiritual wonder. Today, we continue our journey with part 2 of this fascinating tale. We turn our attention to the miraculous shower of rose petals that fell from the heavens in 1948, captivating the faithful and confounding skeptics. These petals, some said to bear holy images, spark a wave of devotion and wonder. But the story doesn't end there. We'll also explore the Church's intense scrutiny and eventual suppression of these events. Despite the initial rejection, the case was reignited decades later by dedicated believers who sought to uncover the truth behind the miracles. Join me as we dive into the miraculous shower of petals, the Church's response, and the determined efforts to reopen the case. We'll examine how faith and controversy intertwine in this remarkable story. Welcome to part 2 of the miraculous mysteries of the apparitions and showers of petals in Lipa on the LilWeird Podcast. Let's continue our exploration. After the apparitions of Mary to Teresita Castillo in Lipa, another miraculous event began to unfold, capturing the imagination and faith of men. On November 11, 1948, rose petals began to fall from the sky, not just within the confines of the convent but also in the surrounding areas. This phenomenon had been occurring inside the convent, but when the petals appeared outside, the event transformed into a public spectacle. News of these miraculous showers quickly spread far and wide. Inside the convent, the rose petals were seen as blessings or divine proof of the apparitions. They fell in Teresita's cell multiple times on the feast day of Saint Teresa of Avila and during the celebration of the Philippine Carmel Silver Jubilee. Even Auxiliary Bishop Oviar, who initially doubted Teresita's claims, is a private shower of petals, which convinced him of the truth behind her visions. As the phenomenon spread beyond the convent walls, petals were reported to have fallen in nearby gardens, local marketplaces, classrooms, and even on the streets of Sampaloc, Manila. The petals, believed by many to be a divine sign, became symbols of blessings and proof of the supernatural events occurring at Lipa, Carmel. The Manila Times first reported the phenomenon on November 17, 1948, with Society editor Jim Austria providing a dramatic first-person account. Austria's report described the striking contrast between the convent's somber atmosphere and the delicate petals falling from the sky, likening it to a scene from an exotic faraway land. The first public report by Jim Austria in the Manila Times opened the floodgates for visitors. Among the early witnesses were prominent figures like Aurora Quezon, the former First Lady of the Philippines, and high-ranking officials such as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Secretary of Agriculture, and the Director of the Philippine Relief and Trade Rehabilitation Administration. These notable individuals, alongside elite Catholics from Manila, were among the first to witness the showers and spread word of the events further. Beyond the political and social elite, the phenomenon drew people from all walks of life: students, families, aid workers, parish groups, and civic organizations traveled from various parts of the Philippines, including distant regions like the Visayas. The convent grounds sometimes hosted crowds as large as 30,000, all gathered to see the miraculous petals for themselves. Accounts of the petal showers varied. Sometimes, only a few petals would drift gently to the ground, while at other times, they would fall in a deluge, continuing for up to half an hour. Witnesses noted the petals' colors, primarily pink but occasionally white, and the accompanying fragrances of roses, lilies or azucenas, and ilang-ilang. The miraculous showers of petals were not just a visual spectacle. They were also believed to be imbued with divine power, leading to numerous stories of miracles and Many witnesses reported miraculous healings associated with the petals. People claim that drinking the water infused with the petal or directly from the Carmelite cisterns cured various ailments. Others reported that applying a petal to wounds resulted in rapid healing. These stories spread quickly, adding to the belief in the supernatural nature of the petals. One notable account involved a person who experienced severe physical pain and was healed after coming into contact with a petal. Another story spoke of a child with a debilitating illness who recovered after a family member brought home a petal. Such tales were common and contributed to the growing legend of the miraculous petals. In addition to physical healings, many experienced profound spiritual transformations. Skeptics reported sudden conversions, and those struggling with their faith found renewed strength and belief. The petals became symbols of hope and divine intervention, reinforcing the faith of many who visited Lipa. Some petals were said to bear holy images, such as the face of Christ, the crucifixion, the Madonna and Child, the Last Supper, and various saints. These effigies, much like the legendary Shroud of Turin or Veronica's veil, were considered divine imprints left on the petals. Witnesses who saw these images described them as extraordinary, further convincing many of the miraculous nature of the events at Lipa. Dr. Eduardo Quisumbing, a renowned botanist, embarked on a mission to identify the rose petals that had miraculously fallen in Lipa. He noted the variety of rose flora in the town, whose names reflected the Philippines' rich colonial history. These included the Escarlatang Pula, a mix of Spanish and Tagalog for red, the Escarlatang Puti, being Tagalog for white, and the Helen Gold, an American variety, among others. Dr. Quisumbing concluded that the petals showered in Lipa closely resembled those of the Escarlatang Pula and Hakiminot varieties.
The shower of petals could have but two origins, namely heavenly or earthly. Of the heavenly, the petals could not have come from any of the heavenly bodies around the earth. The nearest to earth is the moon. Scientifically and more specifically botanically, origin from the moon is impossible and out of the question. Of the earthly origin, the petals could have a foreign origin or a local origin. That the petals might have come from France or Greece is fantastic, as scientifically, this is impossible. One has to consider the various atmospheric factors like distance, direction, and velocity of the wind at the time of the showers and other weather factors. That the petals might have come from the vicinity of Manila, giving an example, and dropped in such limited space, despite the wind and other weather factors, is impossible, scientifically speaking. The shower, fall, or discovery of the petals within the convent is beyond me to explain. That some of the showering or appearance of the petals are coincident with the apparition of the Blessed Virgin is not for me to explain. I was terribly disappointed that I had not witnessed the showering of the petals during my visit to Lipa on November 29th, 1948.
While his conclusion might seem humorous, it carried a deeper significance. Dr. Quisumbing emphasized the importance of rigorously testing supernatural claims to eliminate all possible scientific explanations. Only then, if the phenomenon remained unexplained, could it be considered a potential miracle. His approach provided a counterpoint to the sensational coverage by elite actors and media of the time, reminding people that the materiality of the petals and their significance needed sober and sound investigation. Dr. Quisumbing's skepticism wasn't meant to debunk but to pave the way for genuine belief. For many who witnessed the showering petals, skepticism was a means of protecting against hoaxes and foreign influences, ultimately serving as a pathway to true belief in the miraculous events of Lipa. Mrs. Milan was once a Carmelite sister in Lipa, responsible for taking care of visitors and procuring provisions for the cloistered community present during the 1948 miracles. She accompanied Teresita Castillo to the University of Santo Tomas Hospital in Manila when Teresita was interviewed about the apparitions. Mrs. Milan left the sisterhood in 1950s due to health issues and fell in love with Mr. Milan, who now stood with a demeanor that embodied kabarakuhan, a Batangueño term for a mix of brazen bravery and fearless masculinity. Mr. Milan, who initially doubted the miraculous events, was a skeptic and a heavy drinker. His mother, a devout woman, frequently visited the Carmelites, praying for his transformation. When the shower of petals began, she urged him to visit the Carmel. Convinced that the nuns were staging the miracle to deceive people, Mr. Milan decided to expose the alleged fraud. He borrowed a camera to catch the nuns in the act of throwing petals. Determined, he inspected the convent's windows and found them all closed except one. Climbing an avocado tree to get a better view, he waited silent. As people started shouting about the shower, he saw a petal descending from above, not from the window. Despite the windy conditions, the petal floated straight down. This sight defying all logical explanations, it led him to believe it was indeed the Blessed Virgin causing the phenomenon. Mr. Milan's journey from skepticism to belief mirrors the process used by church commissions investigating miracles. These commissions exhaust all reasonable explanations before considering the supernatural. While the church's initial investigation did not rule in favor of the miraculous, rumors persisted that the nuns had used an industrial-sized blower to stage the showers, adding another layer of intrigue to the story. In both Mr. Milan's personal experience and the church's investigative approach, the miraculous nature of the petals becomes evident not through ordinary appearances, but through the extraordinary and unreasonable circumstances that defy simple explanation. For Mr. Milan, this truth was embodied by the Blessed Virgin, while for the Church, it remains a complex interplay of faith, skepticism, and the search for the supernatural. The debate over the origin of the miraculous petals in Lipa has seen its fair share of skepticism. Comments about the alleged use of blowers to create the showers abound. Meli Quizon, a Lipa native instrumental in reopening the case in 1980s, recounted how the nuns were bewildered by the accusation. They thought the investigators were referring to a hip-hip, a small bamboo tube used for stoking fires. Imagining the nuns on the roof blowing through these tubes to create the showers, this image was laughably implausible. Many, like Mr. Milan, concluded that it was impossible for the nuns to have generated the petals flight pattern. Others argued that the blower would have been too noisy and large to go unnoticed. And importantly, there was no electricity in Lipa at that time. These arguments reinforced the belief that the petals' origin was indeed miraculous. The petals were considered miraculous not only because they defied natural laws, but also because some were said to bear holy images. In Christian iconology, these images are described as akeropoietos, which means not made by hand. Walter Benjamin, a notable cultural critic, noted that photography, like the ancient concept of akeropoietos, frees the hand from the most important artistic functions. The effigies on the petals appeared much like photographic negatives, visible through contrasts of light and shadow, without any damage to the petals' structure, except for rare occasions when the petals could be examined in person. Photography became essential for their propagation, allowing people to view these miraculous images. The relationship between the effigy-bearing petals and photography highlighted the blend of ancient belief and modern technology. This shared structure of phenomenality made it difficult to consider the petals without imagining other artifacts produced by mechanical means, even if it ultimately disavows any causal connection. In conclusion, the Lipa petals' miraculous nature was affirmed through testimonies and the implausibility of alternative explanations. The ongoing debate over their origin and the divine images they bore continues to fascinate and inspire, bridging the gap between faith and reason. As the miraculous events at Lipa Carmel continued to draw attention and devotion, the Catholic Church began to scrutinize the claims more closely. The widespread reports of the showers of rose petals, miraculous healings, and the apparitions of Mary Mediatrix prompted the Church to investigate these occurrences thoroughly. Despite the growing public belief in the supernatural nature of these events, the Church ultimately labeled them as not true and took significant steps to suppress further discussion and devotion. In response to the burgeoning public interest and the mounting reports of miracles, the Church established a commission to investigate the events at Lipa. This commission, composed of bishops and other church officials, conducted a detailed examination of the claims, interviewing witnesses, and scrutinizing the evidence presented. The goal was to determine whether the events could be authenticated as genuine supernatural occurrences or dismissed as natural phenomena or fabrications. In 1951, after extensive investigation, the Church issued a negative decree regarding the apparitions and miracles at Lipa. The Commission concluded that there was no evidence to support the supernatural nature of the events. The official statement declared that the apparitions and the showers of rose petals were not of divine origin. This decree aimed to curtail the growing devotion and prevent the spread of what the Church considered to be unfounded beliefs. This period was especially harrowing for Teresita Castillo, whose experiences were at the